Let us now move to the important topic of this chapter, that is Mendel laws of inheritance. Mendel is the scientist who had been studied about the laws of inheritance. Not just studied, he derived number of laws to prove that how traits have been inherited by the next generations. So as a part of that, he had been derived 3 laws. Among them, as a part of 10th class, we are going to learn about 2 important laws of inheritance that were proposed by John Gregor Mendel. Among them, the first one is Mendel's first law of inheritance. I repeat, Mendel's first law of inheritance, which is commonly called as law of segregation. Law of what? Segregation, or law of segregation, or law of dominance. Law of dominance. So what is the word meaning segregation? Keeping away from the rest. Keeping away from the rest. Or this law is also famously known as law of dominance. After deriving the first law, Mendel came to know what is a dominant trait or what is a recessive trait. So to give the definition for the dominant trait and recessive trait, Mendel studied so many experiments. So after proving all those experiments, he had given the definition for the word dominant trait and recessive trait. So first law mainly explains about how dominant traits are going to appear in the upcoming generations. That's why it is also called as law of dominance. So let us see first. As you have learned in mathematical classes, when you are going to derive a law, it will be having a statement at the first, right? So before going to learn about it, what he had studied to prove the first law, let us see. So when Mendel was observing his garden, which contains number of pea plants, he observed that there are 2 tall parental plants, or both the parents are taller, or one of the parent is tall, the other parent is dwarf. So he was observing, because it is a self-pollinating plant, what happened, you know? The pollen grains, for example, you think this is the male parent or paternal parent, and this is the female parental plant or maternal parental plant. So when the pollen grains of male parent fall on the stigma of the female parent, pollination had been taken place. Pollination had been taken place, and later it leads to fertilization. After fertilization, these 2 plants give seeds, right or not? So what happened? He was waiting what type of plant is going to grow from these 2 plants. Later, when he observed tall is the phenotype, right? Which is visible to our eyes. So this is phenotype, and dwarf is the phenotype here. If we know the phenotypes, can't we write the genotypes? Yes, we can write. What is the genotype for the phenotype tall? Capital T, because the genes always work in pairs. So this tallness is because of the genes present in the cells. So what is the gene arrangement? Capital T. And the dwarfness is the phenotype. What is the genotype for this? The genotype for the dwarfness is small t. So he was observing what type of new plant is going to come after fertilization. Surprisingly, in the upcoming generation, that means in the F1 generation, when he was observing, he found both the plants which were found from these 2 parents have grown taller. Are you getting my point? Among these 2 parents, one is tall, the other one is dwarf. And when they reproduce, when they give seeds, and when those seeds were put in the soil, he was waiting because one of the parent is tall, the other one is dwarf. He was thinking that in the F1 generation also some plants will grow tall, some plants will grow dwarf, like that he was thinking. But surprisingly, what happened in the F1 generation? In the F1 generation, what do you mean by the word F1 generation? The progeny which is formed by crossing two parental plants, right or not? So all the F1 progeny growing taller. So he had a confusion. One of the parent is dwarf. When they both contribute their gametes, some of them at least they should grow dwarf, no? Why are they not growing dwarf? In the F1 generation, why all these plants are growing taller? What happened to this dwarf gene which has come from the female parent? So like that he was thinking, and he continued his experiments. And he derived the first law. Are you getting my point? Because he is already good in mathematics and science, he blended his mathematical knowledge in science, and he derived the first law of inheritance, that is law of dominance. So how he derived, we are going to see now. So before going to see the mathematical expression for the first law, let us first know the statement given by the Mendel for the first law of inheritance. So for laws always there would be a statement. This statement was given by the Mendel after conducting the experiment. Are you getting my point? Not just one time. Thousands of times, repeatedly he conducted the experiments, and he derived the first law of inheritance, that is law of segregation or law of dominance. So what is the statement given by the Mendel after conducting experiments? The traits of an organism, are due to the internal factors. Traits of an organism are decided by the internal factors that work in pairs. Are you getting my point? So what is the first law derived by the Mendel, and what is the statement of that law? The traits of an organism are decided by the internal factors that work in pairs. You have to note an important point here. At the time of Mendel, there was no word like gene. The name gene is given by another scientist, Johnson. But at the time of Mendel, he used to call those genes as internal factors. So as per his experiments, he proved the first law as the traits of an organism are decided by the internal factors that work in pairs. Indirectly, I can say that he wanted to tell us that gene is the unit of inheritance. Are you getting my point? Gene is the unit which carries the traits from parents to offspring. That was his first law. He proved, basing on the first law, gene acts as the unit of inheritance. How does he prove? Let us see now.